Whistleblower claims that people have been killed by non-human intelligences. Let's watch.
Decorated former combat veteran David Grusch went public last week with claims that the U.S. has a decades-old UFO retrieval program. Grusch also dropped the bombshell allegation that people have been killed by, quote, non-human intelligences. Here he is on News Nation. Let's watch.
We're definitely not alone. Absolutely, the data points empirically that we're not alone, yeah.
Do we have bodies? Do we have species of
Well,
non-human?
naturally, when you recover something that's either landed or crashed, sometimes you encounter dead pilots. And believe it or not, as fantastical as that sounds, it's true.
Grusch, who previously worked as a representative for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, where his job was to help investigate UFOs, also said recently, quote, "I think the logical fallacy there is because they're advanced, they're kind, we'll never really understand their full intent, and that's because we're not them. But I think what appears to be malevolent activity has happened. That's based on nuclear site probing activities and witness testimony."
Yep. So there's actually a couple whistleblowers that talk about this. Richard Doty is one of the ones that comes out and talks about this. He worked for the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. He basically was one of the people that would come and investigate any UFO matters, and I believe he was in operation during the probably 70s, 80s, and maybe early 90s, where he would go into all sorts of different areas of the country, investigate any UFO sightings, interview everybody that was involved, kind of get the full story, and then submit reports to the higher-ups where he was working.
Grusch went further, saying the U.S. would do anything, including killing people, in an effort to keep this secret.
And they have. One of the bigger people that have been killed by this is his name is Phil Schneider. He actually was one of the he was a geologist, and he worked on what's called DUMBs, deep underground military bases. He was one of the chief engineers that helped kind of design those, and basically kind of, you know, because they're carving out large tunnels and bedrock and basically creating caverns out and putting bases down there, and this is where the taxpayer money is going. And he was strangled to death in his front porch, when he opened the door. So it's and he was very vocal about that. Look up his interviews. His name is Phil Schneider, PhilSchneider. I would look that up on DuckDuckGo. He's kind of hidden from the traditional search engines and whatnot, but he has great speeches where he goes and tours the United States and does these talks about what he did when he worked in these classified projects, and basically, you know, was a patriotic, you know, about it because of what he did, and he felt the need and the desire to share that with everybody because they deserve a right to know.
Yeah, so I'm fascinated by this. I don't mean to nerd out again, but this idea that we can perceive beings as malevolent because we don't understand their behavior is a core principle of Star Trek, and why the Prime Directive is so important, the non-interference principle. An early episode with this thing they called the crystalline entity. This thing was going around destroying planets, causing chaos, this big crystal rock-like thing in space, and they realized, this happens a lot in Star Trek, oh, it's just trying to feed. Oh, it's just trying to eat.
Guy's just like, what is she talking about?
Oh, it doesn't really realize what it's doing or the impact it's having on other species. And it would be interesting to interrogate whether or not, I mean, this is also the doomsday scenario of so many sci-fi movies. An alien comes, a human overreacts, shoots them, etc., and now we're in an intergalactic war. So there is something, I think, kind of satisfying and interesting about someone contemplating that it would be actually difficult to judge the intent of a UFO or
what are the odds
ET?
we encounter or they come here to encounter us, an alien or extra-dimensional or extraterrestrial, a non-human intelligence, but that is like within the ballpark of our intelligence level? What I mean is, like, they're interested in our nuclear stuff. Like ants don't have any relationship to human beings. Like, ants don't go about their lives thinking, what do the human beings think, right?
They're pretty interested in our picnic having behavior.
But they're like, we're not perceivable to the ants. We're so different and distinct.
But isn't that
And
kind of the
it will
point?
be like that with aliens.
I think that's exactly what we're saying. That me and Grusch is what we're
guess.
talking about. Is the idea that because ants don't perceive us and we largely don't pay attention to ants, there are behaviors that we engage in that really have nothing to do with the ants but that are harmful to them. Let's say we build a condo and it digs up an anthill,
Right.
and there are behaviors that they have that are at least irritating to us, if not harmful. There's fire ants and more dangerous kinds of ants. But it's not really about us. They're just protecting their territory or trying to come to their
Right.
kitchen for snacks or whatever it is. So I think that's a really significant possibility.
But what is being suggested is a similar level. Oh, they have crafts they're right. They're recognizably non-human, but we can kind of see that they're spaceships. They're interested in our nuclear secrets. That's like
Okay, first of all, they're not necessarily interested in our nuclear secrets. Why they're so interested in the nuclear activity that we have going on here is because when you set off a nuclear bomb, one, it causes much destruction and many souls inside the planet if it hits somewhere is completely just those were innocent people and those innocent people died for no reason. That's number one. Number two, when you blow up a nuclear bomb or nuclear device, it actually causes some, and I'm not a physicist, but I know of the theoretical workings behind this. So it causes like a shift, a rip in space-time, if you will. So there's dimensions, there's layers of dimension that's happening simultaneously all around us, much like a harp. And basically, the hertz frequency, the higher you go up, you know each chord on the harp is a different hertz frequency, and that's much like our reality. So so when you create a nuclear bomb, it causes rifts in that and causes destruction within that. So they're very interested in how we treat each other with the nuclear activities. Nuclear is not a safe activity as far as like bombs are concerned. And that's why they will actually shut down our nuclear sites. This has happened time and time again. There's many stories. I mentioned earlier about Richard Doty. He mentions a story about that and some other whistleblowers. There's a great documentary called um, Unacknowledged by Dr. Stephen Greer, in which he has many whistleblower testimonies come out and discuss this very thing about extraterrestrials or UFOs just coming near nuclear silos, and then all of a sudden their nuclear bombs are shut off. They have no firing capabilities. And these are supposed to be the most secure weapons that we have available in the world, and yet they're getting dismantled and basically just disarmed immediately by these extraterrestrials or UFOs or whatever. So this kind of fallacy that he has is just one that's not really. I mean, he hasn't done research for 4 or 5 years into this stuff, and so this is what normal people think, and so it's rightfully so that you wouldn't really recognize that they would have a vested interest in the way you treat each other, because the way you treat each other is the way that you would potentially treat them.
encountering like another country or something, or a human species, like a similar Earth-like planet with similar. Do you know what I mean? That's too close to like what our intelligence and interests and how we do things is. Like a genuine alien will be like, it might not even be perceptible to the human in the way that in the way that microscopic organisms.
And there are so many extraterrestrials out there. It's much like the Amazon rainforest, that it's happening on a macro scale throughout the universe. There are so many kinds of extraterrestrials. There's dumber extraterrestrials than we are, less intelligent, not as smart, no spacefaring capabilities. But there are ones that are also dumber, but they have spacefaring capabilities. It's a very wide, vast spectrum of different types of extraterrestrials. There are many that are smarter than us. Many that are not even, that are ethereal in nature, that are light beings. There are blob beings that are like more of a mucus, kind of viscous looking, but that has a shape. And so there's just a vast amount of range of extraterrestrials that they range in all shapes and sizes. They're hybrids, and just like how we have things like octopi and horses and stuff. I mean, on a different planet, they would be extraterrestrials to them. But if you advance a horse 3 or 4 or 5 million years, that horse will be able to communicate and talk much like we are today. It's just it's where you're at on the timeline of your own species development.
Organisms are not perceptible to us.
That's a fascinating point, because Grusch also weighed in on that. This is from an article in New York Magazine that is a skeptic of Grusch and has tabulated what it considers to be more of his outlandish claims. One of them says, I don't want to necessarily denote origin. I don't think we have all the data to say, oh, they're coming from a certain location. He proposed the vehicles the Pentagon is hiding could have come from a different physical dimension as described in quantum mechanics, saying, we know there are extra dimensions due to high energy particle collisions, et cetera, and there's a theoretical framework to explain that. Does that help? Does that help for you, or does that make it worse?
No, I think.
Right. So one of the people that actually talks about this is let's just say you see a craft, right? It's the traditional saucer. You've seen this on every movie basically that ever came out about them. So they're saucers, right? So let's say the saucer is 45 feet in diameter. Okay. Sometimes the whistleblowers that have worked inside these craft, Bob Lazar, Emery Smith is another great one. So they'll walk in and they'll report the craft being 100 foot, and much larger than what the craft is on the outside. It will actually be much larger than that on the inside. So they're using some kind of quantum, basically field that when you phase inside the craft, it's able to create its own environment that's larger. That doesn't. That's why this is the technology that would be unexplainable to us as far as imperceivable in the human eye, because our intelligence is not quite there yet to understand why that would happen.
I think that's all possible, but that does not at all, to me, resemble what we're talking about when we're talking about flying objects people have seen and recovered pieces of ships and technology and weird glimpses of things in the desert or where else. That is very different, and that's, I think, largely a hoax and not true. When an actual alien presence will be as different to us. It'd be like a shadow or an ink blot, or something. It'll come from it'll not be something we can even it'll be so foreign, so different to and anything that it's almost like beyond our imagination.
Yeah, I really like that. Some people have critiqued Star Trek and other sci-fi shows for this humanoid paradox.
Yeah.
Why does every alien basically look like a human with makeup on?
Alien,
That's actually a good point. Emery Smith was an exobiologist and traditional biologist. He was a doctor in the military. He reports that once these species get to a certain level of advancement, they actually get what's called a 5-star. Okay, like the Vitruvian Man that Leonardo da Vinci has, where the man's going like this, and it shows the diagram of the man. There are. And I'm not quite sure why this is happening, but they get to the point of development where a lot of them actually come to that 5-star pentagram type figure. So a lot of them have arms, a head, and a torso and a body. That doesn't mean that some aren't. Well, I wouldn't say some. There are millions out there that are not like that. But it just, once you get to that certain level of advancement, they tend to create more of a 5-star pentagram type shape. Now, I'm not too sure if that's because of the energy fields of these beings, or the mind matrix creating this pentagram for some reason. But that's kind of what I know about that.
Yeah, well, because the costume design was not very good with Star Trek.
Right, we didn't have sci-fi. They didn't have special effects rather back then, where you could have blobs of clouds moving through the hallways or whatever.
Yeah.
But the way they do try to explain it in Star Trek, one of my favorite episodes, there's an arms race. There's this message embedded that somebody finds in an archaeological dig somewhere, and everyone's looking for it. The Federation is trying to get at it because they think it's like a fun artifact. The Klingons are going after it because they think it's a weapon. So are the Romulans. Everyone's chasing this thing through space, and when they find it, spoiler alert for a 30-year-old episode of TV, they discover that an old alien race that died out millennia before any of us evolved out of the primordial soup knew its race was dying out and scattered its DNA across the galaxy, causing everybody to evolve in the same way.
You have to come up with some kind of explanation along those lines, or else it would
Sure.
be.
But Grusch, I will say he's not claiming like little green men or something that just looks like a human in makeup or a small child in makeup. You know, I think that what he's been talking about does contemplate other dimensions, non-human corporeal forms, non-corporeal forms. And he's been very clear again that he has not personally laid eyes on any of this. He was told by a source about the reality of some of this stuff. I also want to push back, Robbie. I saw some interesting pushback against some of your points.
Go ahead.
Some of your points from the last UFO segment. You mentioned that it was incredible to you that aliens would only have landed in the United States and only in rural areas, and what are the odds, et cetera, et cetera. It's worth noting that Grusch says the first UFO case he was briefed on involved a vehicle downed in Italy in 1933, decidedly not America. The Mussolini government had allegedly kept it in storage to the end of World War II. Pope Pius VII back-channeled the existence of the object to the United States, which it obtained in 1944 or 1945. So the argument is...
Was that one of the sequels to the Da Vinci Code, or is that a real thing that happened?
They're gonna eat you.
I know. Look, you have to. I'm just expressing my skepticism of all these subjects, or maybe there's another dimension, and evil Robbie from dimension 19684X crossed here, killed and replaced the real Robbie, and is trying to throw you off the set.
I think that's likely. I also love that you're Scully and I'm Mulder in this dynamic.